At this point in the show, the only other evolutionary biologist I've spoken with is your colleague Andy Knoll at Harvard. And we talked about the earliest life on Earth and how it shaped the climate. Yet I understand, and from looking at some of your work, there are a plethora of different topics in evolutionary biology, and maybe we'll get to some in a moment. But I wanted to start with how your particular interests form. So why have you and your lab been devoting so much time to the first fish that ventured onto land?
Because it's a subset of, I think, one of the great problems in biology is how do the major transitions in evolution happen? I mean, I love these puzzles where it seems so impossible at first, and then you just show, well, that it actually happened in some very surprising ways. That is, going from a fish to a tetrapod, or from a single-celled organism to a multicellular organism, or any of the great transitions in evolution, those really kind of explain a lot. Number one, they tell us a lot about how our world came to be, but they hold all kinds of important biology, geology, and so within them. They are fundamentally multidisciplinary questions. And they almost always take us to surprising places where I learn new things and I can apply it to other fields. So the fish to tetrapod transition, so I've always been interested in great transitions in evolution since freshman year of college. Just Carl Sagan, the great documentaries, great books, Jay Bronowski's Ascent of Man. These really caught my interest. But when I was in graduate school, I was sort of looking around for a problem to work on, and I was in a seminar. It was essentially great transitions in the history of life, and each week was a different transition, and a student would present. We'd get all the papers, both classic ones and recent ones. And, it's sort of like speed dating with great puzzles in science. And I remember seeing the fish to tetrapod transition. I remember the moment I saw this, like one sort of cartoonish slide that showed a fish on top, tetrapod on the bottom, little arrow connecting them. I was thinking,
maybe I should just cut you off very briefly to clarify. Tetrapod, for our listeners who don't know, that's 4
I'll
feet.
Repeat the whole thing, sure. So when I saw this diagram, which had a fish on top, and it had a terrestrial animal, land-living animal with arms and legs, we call them tetrapods, on the bottom, with an arrow connecting the two, I was like, whoa, that's a first-class scientific problem. How did that happen? Because everything has to change, right? You're living in water versus living in land. Think about all the physiological variables. You're dealing with gravity as a new force, desiccation, new sensory environment. So I thought that would be a great problem to hang my shingle. And I was training to be a paleontologist at the time, since we've taken other approaches. But yeah, that was kind of it was really kind of that inspiration, seeing a diagram that kind of created a puzzle in my head,
Just a very quick question. You said you've always been interested in the major transitions in evolution. Beyond fish to tetrapod, what are some of just the other major transitions?
Origin of life. Origin of new kinds of metabolisms, photosynthesis and aerobic metabolism, origin of eukaryotic cells with different kinds of organelles in them, the shift from single-celled organisms to organisms with bodies composed of many cells, millions, if not billions, if not trillions of cells, the transition from invertebrates to vertebrates, fish to tetrapod, reptiles to birds, reptiles to mammals, primates, non-bipedal primates to bipedal primates. Pick your transition, and and I think what kindled that really was, if you really kind of want to know history, is I loved museums. I really did not like classes. So I'd look forward to like those field trip days where the teacher would say, "We're going to the museum today," and there was always a refuge for me. Intellectual refuge as well as a refuge from class. And I just love that stuff. And I remember thinking about these puzzles, looking at like the fossils of dinosaurs or just the dioramas of animals from the past and thinking about lost worlds and change and so forth. And that sort of crystallized into a scientific interest.
Well, one other thing that you said that jumped out at me is that evolutionary biology is concerned with fundamentally multidisciplinary questions.
Oh yeah.
So there's geology, as I found with Andy Knoll, there's chemistry. Most of what I know about evolutionary biology, which is very little, comes from a few books I've read by Dawkins and Gould, which I think are more theoretically oriented, and then the philosopher Daniel Dennett, which is more philosophically oriented. But I'm wondering how the field or how an evolutionary biology department breaks down in a contemporary academic setting. Are there major different branches of evolutionary biology that are all just seeking to better understand evolution with different tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way I look at it is the questions are the unifying theme. It's what's different are the tools. I just even look at that in my lab, how it breaks down. So the way, I'll just give you the micro level in my lab, then we'll go to the departments. In the lab, we look at great transitions in evolution, particularly the fish to terrestrial animal. But there's a genetic piece where we look at the genes and developmental processes in living creatures, fish and amphibians, and try to understand the differences and similarities among them. Then there's the paleontological piece where we go out and find fossils. There's comparative anatomy as well. All these are different empiricisms, different tools that feed into answering a common question, right? And so when you think about how departments are organized, like in Chicago, we'll have different departments. We'll have a department of molecular biology and a department of anatomy and a department of human genetics. But evolution is in what's called, we call them graduate committees, which is basically multi-departmental. So when we train students, it goes among all the departments. Actually, it goes to some departments in the humanities, social sciences, goes to the Field Museum of Natural History, Lincoln Park Zoo, things like that. So it truly is multidisciplinary, and the way it plays out is typically the differences are really kind of among empirical approaches, less the questions that people ask. And so you have theoreticians, quantitative and theoretical geneticists, molecular geneticists, all different kinds, and it's been a bit of a struggle in my career because I've wanted to do it all, because to answer some of these questions, but there's only a limited amount of time in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I saw that on your lab's website that you're researching genetics, kinematics, skeletal structure. You have expeditions going on, all sorts of things. But one last question I wanted to ask, though, about the breakdown within the field is that I saw you wrote that you believe progress in evolutionary biology, it comes from studying different scales of time, physical structure. So I'm guessing that means gross anatomy, and then maybe cellular biology, and then phylogenesis. And I'm wondering what all of this means. How it connects to the different branches that you just mentioned of evolutionary
Well, I
biology.
mean, think about this. Molecular changes to genes cause changes in the DNA, which cause changes in development, which cause changes in anatomy, which affect an animal's ecology and the workings of its environment. So when you want to understand all that, you're transcending multiple levels of organization, from gene to development to anatomy to ecosystem. And I'm skipping a whole bunch of levels in there, but that's the idea, right? So if you want to get a sense of like evolutionary revolutions, great transitions, you really got to start thinking about integrating these different levels of organization. But it's also different temporal time, right? So there's the kind of developmental change that happens in an individual.